Hello everyone, this is Miss Slavens, and this recording is for Pre-AP Biology. Today our focus is going to be on cell membranes and the movement across them. All cells need an inside and an outside, which is the purpose of the cell or the plasma membrane. It allows it to separate the cell from its environment. So it is the boundary around the cell. It allows things to get in, such as food, like sugars, proteins, and fats, and other materials like salts, oxygen, and water. It also allows the cell to eliminate things like waste, which can be ammonia, salts, carbon dioxide, and water, or other products that it makes, such as proteins. So the entire purpose of the cell membrane is so that it can get materials in and products or wastes out. That's what the cell membrane is composed of. The membrane is made up of a special kind of protein called phospholipids, which literally means split personality. And it is a double layer, which is called the phospholipid bilayer. There's a side that is attracted to water, which is your phosphate side, and a side that is repelled by water, which is your lipid side. This phospholipid bilayer is designed so that the hydrophilic side, the side that is attracted to water, faces both the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell. And the lipid end, which is the hydrophobic end, faces inward. Since it is two layers of phospholipids, it is called the bilayer. So this cell membrane needs to control what gets in and out of the cell. It allows some materials to pass, but not all. Because some materials pass, but not all of them, it is referred to as semi-permeable or partially permeable. So what needs to get across the membranes? Things like sugars, lipids, amino acids, oxygen, water, salt, and wastes. So what kind of molecules can get across the cell directly? Those are your fats and your oils. They pass directly through. But what about the other stuff? To get other materials through, the cell membrane has to make channels or doors in its membrane. These protein channels allow substances in and out, and they are specific to the material they allow in and out. There are water channels, there are salt channels, sugar channels, amino acid channels, and other things that need to get in and out have specific channels. These channels are made up of proteins and are embedded into the bilipid membrane. Proteins like both water and lipids. But the membrane is actually a collage of proteins and other molecules embedded in this fluid matrix of the bilipid layer. They are constantly moving the arrangement of all of these parts. Cholesterol, which you can see as part of the membrane, actually spaces the phospholipids apart. The carbohydrates are not inserted into the membrane because they are too hydrophilic for that. Instead, they are attached to embedded proteins, which are called glycoproteins. These surface carbohydrates function in cell recognition, cell signaling, and cell adhesion. So let's look at these membrane carbohydrates a little bit more in depth. These membrane carbohydrates play a key role in cell-to-cell recognition, which is the ability of a cell to distinguish one cell from another, such as antigens. In addition, they are important in organ and tissue development, and they are the basis for rejection of foreign cells by the immune system. You may have heard of the 4 different human blood groups, A, B, AB, and O. These 4 blood groups differ in their external carbohydrates that are on the red blood cells. There are a variety of functions of the membrane proteins. For example, signal transduction, which is transmitting a signal from outside of the cell to the cell nucleus, is like receiving a hormone which triggers a receptor on the inside of the cell that then signals to the nucleus that a protein must be made. This is one of the functions of the membrane proteins. This would be an example of the membrane protein acting as a transporter. They also play roles in enzyme activities, cell surface receptors, cell surface identity markers, cell adhesion, where the cells stick to one another, and attachment to the cytoskeleton. So these proteins act as doors in the cell membrane. They are channels to move specific molecules through the cell. You can kind of think of them as donuts with the hole in the center only allowing certain things in. Transport protein is very specific as to the substance that it will translocate or move. For example, the glucose transport protein in the liver will carry glucose from the blood to the cytoplasm. However, it will not carry fructose, which is very similar in structure. If you remember when we talked about the structure of water having a positive end and a negative end that attracts ions, some of these transport proteins have a hydrophilic or water-loving channel that allows certain molecules or ions to use as a tunnel through the membrane. This simply provides corridors allowing a specific molecular ion to cross the membrane. These channel proteins allow for fast transport. So then our question becomes, why do molecules move through the membrane if you can give them a channel? This is primarily because, as you can imagine, the channel gets backed up similar to a traffic jam. The cell, however, requires large amounts of certain molecules, and therefore you could not get them through the channel fast enough. When the cell is in need of large amounts of molecules, it moves through a gradient from high concentration to low concentration. We refer to this as diffusion. So diffusion is the movement of materials from high to low concentration. You can kind of think of it as equaling out. This term is referred to as equilibrium. Diffusion is a form of passive transport. In other words, no energy is needed on the part of the cell. It happens on its own. The diffusion of water is specifically referred to as osmosis. If materials are simply moving from high concentration to low concentration straight through the membrane, it is referred to as simple diffusion. On the other hand, if the molecules are moving from high concentration to low concentration through a channel, it is referred to as facilitated diffusion. Facilitated means that you must initiate it, which is what the channel does. So with diffusion, we move from high to low concentration. It can occur directly through the membrane, which is simple diffusion, and no energy is required, or it can occur through help with a protein channel, which is referred to as facilitated diffusion, which means with help, and no energy is needed for this either. So this is an overview of simple versus facilitated diffusion. We did mention osmosis, which is diffusion of water, and since it is more complex, we will look at it specifically in a separate recording. This concludes cell membranes and the movement across them.